Yes, thank you all. You may be seated.
I'll suggest to the judges that the back room has a lot more leg room in the back.
Okay.
I'll introduce your presiding judge and then turn the courtroom over. The presiding judge is Rahul Hari, United States Attorney here in Los Angeles. Rahul is the 2015 Top Gun National Champion, one of 2 people ever to be in the finals there, a 2-time All-American. Rahul, the courtroom is yours.
Thank you. Thank you all for being so prepared today. Great seeing you all here. I'm looking at our jurors. No conflicts. Is that right?
No conflict.
Okay, perfect. With that, I think the court is ready to get started. Why don't we hear from the parties?
Good afternoon, Judge. Sam Farnsworth for the plaintiff. I'm joined by Ethan Donovan.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Bryan Walker. I'm joined here today by my good friend and co-counsel, Ms. Katie.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, parties. Thank you. I am logging into our ballot Farnsworth v. Walker. Is that right?
That's right.
Yes, Your Honor.
Great. All right. Any housekeeping matters from the plaintiff?
Yes, Judge. First, we move to invoke Rules 603 and 615, calling for the constructive swearing in and sequestration of all witnesses.
That's done. Does the defense join in that request?
Yes, Your Honor, but 615 just bars any party representatives in this trial. We'd like to note that in representing the defendant in this case, Dragon Studios, Mr. Cole Doyle will be joining us at counsel table as the party member.
Great. He will be accepted from sequestration.
Next, do we have your permission to move freely about the well?
That's fine. Don't approach the witness stand or the jury without permission, but you can use the well and you can approach one another without permission.
Sounds good. With that, we're ready to proceed.
Perfect. Any housekeeping matters from the defense?
Just a few things, Your Honor. First, for purposes of this trial, we'd like to note that we'll be using verdict form F. It's going to be the 5th page of that bench book here in front of you.
Verdict form F, you said?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you.
And furthermore, Your Honor, just a couple more preferences because this is the first time we've served in your court. When an objection is sustained, should we move to strike or consider offending testimony stricken?
Please move to strike so I know exactly what portion of the answer is being stricken or permission is being sought. Sometimes the whole answer might not be objectionable.
Yes, Your Honor, with that, defense is ready to go.
Okay, any substantive issues before we proceed to opening statements?
No.
Okay, with that, why don't we turn to opening statements?
He waited for a signal that never came. It's June 21st, 2023. Movie star Peter Jones is getting ready for a big stunt. He straps on his parachute, hops into his motorcycle, and puts in an earpiece. He's nervous. He's about to drive off a mountain. He has a team behind him. A team he trusts to signal when it's time to deploy his parachute. He hits the throttle, rushes down the ramp, and flies 2,700 feet up in the air. He starts to fall. 2,500 feet, no signal. 2,000 feet, no signal. 1,500 feet, no signal. 1,000 feet, no signal. 500 feet, no signal. He pulls the parachute, but by then it's too late. Peter Jones hits the ground too hard, and he dies. He waited for a signal that never came. And that's why we brought an action of negligence against the defendant, Dragon Studios, the company responsible for his safety on set. Now, usually, when a plaintiff brings a claim of negligence, we have a burden of proof. But this case is actually a little unusual, because the defense has actually already conceded our claim of negligence. The only issue at stake in this trial is whether or not Peter Jones assumed the risk of that stunt. That means it's the defense's burden to show you it's more likely than not true that Mr. Jones knew the risk of the stunt, and that risk was what caused his death. They're not going to be able to meet their burden for three simple reasons. First, the defendant promised Mr. Jones to signal when it was time to deploy his parachute. Second, the defendant never sent that signal. And third, because of that failure, Mr. Jones died. Let's break that down, starting with fact number one. The defendant promised Mr. Jones when it was time to deploy his parachute. We're going to call Mr. Jones' agent, a man named Eli Godin. He's going to tell you about the defendant's promises. He's going to tell you the defendant promised to signal after 9 seconds of free fall through an earpiece that Mr. Jones was wearing. But you're going to hear they never sent that signal on June 21st, 2022. That's fact two. The evidence will show that the defendant wanted an action scene for the ages, and that the longer Mr. Jones spent falling, the better the shot would be. So you're going to hear that on June 21st, on their final take, when they needed the perfect take, the producer, Mr. Doyle, never sends that signal. And that brings us to fact number three, that because of that failure, Mr. Jones dies. Now, this case is about assumption of risk. And what I want you to look for during this trial is whether Mr. Jones knew that Mr. Doig wouldn't send him a signal at all. Because the evidence is going to show that there were no backup plans on set, that Mr. Jones wasn't given an altimeter to measure his own altitude, and that on June 21st, there wasn't even a stunt coordinator in the room. You're going to see that the only thing keeping Mr. Jones safe, telling him when to deploy his parachute, was the trust he placed in the defendant. Some cases are complicated, but you're going to see that this one's actually pretty simple. The defendant wanted a longer cut, and that's what cut Mr. Jones' life short. That's why at the end of this trial, we're going to ask him to find the defendant liable, because he waited for a signal that never came. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Opening for defense.
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court. This stunt wasn't supervised. It's June 21st, 2023. 2,701 feet in the air. And 31-year-old Peter Jones is standing on the side of a mountain. Everyone is in place. The camera crews are waiting for the word action. The producers are in the tent waiting to give that signal. But what we did see that day, was that a stunt coordinator was nowhere to be found. Was that the one person that was missing was the one person that mattered. Now, just a minute ago, Mr. Farnsworth said in his opening statement that Mr. Jones had a team behind him. A team that he could trust. And members of the jury, I'll be up front, we agree. We agree that for a stunt like this to be pulled off, you need a team behind you. So in order to understand what really happened in this case, you have to look far before he even stood on the side of that mountain. Because today you'll learn that on June 1st of 2022, Peter Jones approached his team with an idea. He says, in this next film, I want to go down a mountain, jump off the ramp, and fall from that 2,701 feet. Now, it's nothing he's not used to, members of the jury. As I'm sure you've known, he's been in movie after movie after movie doing stunts just like this one. But today you'll learn that there is a single person, a woman named Sky Stebbins, who's behind all of it. But today you'll learn that on the day of this crash, Miss Stebbins wasn't there. You'll learn that on the day of this crash, Mr. Jones knew that. You'll learn that on the day of that crash, no security coordinator was there to stop him. That's why you're here. Now, Mr. Farnsworth mentioned it a moment ago. And it's true that typically in a courtroom like this, the plaintiff is the one that comes with the burden of proof. But in this courtroom today, the defense has taken on one of our own. We took on the burden to prove to you by a preponderance of the evidence that Mr. Jones understood the risk he was going into. That's exactly what we're going to go do today. And we're going to do that by breaking this case down into 3 simple facts. What Peter Jones wanted, what he knew, and what he did anyways. Let's take them one at a time. First, what Peter Jones wanted. Because today you'll learn that Peter Jones had a reputation for doing his own stunts. But above all that, every single one that he's come up with is one of his own ideas. Today you'll learn that he wanted to have a reputation amongst the community to do things that other actors would never even dream of. You'll learn that he thought about that the moment he sat on the side of that mountain on June 21st. So second, what he knew. Because members of the jury, he knew that he was going to be putting up some risks. You're going to hear about an interview that Mr. Jones had with a local newspaper, where he acknowledges that for this stunt in particular, there's a chance he might not survive. Today you'll learn that he understood that risk. So third, what he did anyways. Because you'll learn about on June 21st how he went to the side of that mountain knowing that Sky Stebbins wasn't there that evening. That despite not having a stunt coordinator and not having anyone in the area that was trained, he was going to do that stunt anyways. You'll learn that stunt wasn't supervised. Now, members of the jury, what you're going to hear throughout this trial is going to be difficult. But it's going to be simple. You're going to learn that this accident should have never happened. And that at any given moment, without a stunt coordinator on set, he could have stopped, turned around, and went home. But he didn't. He did a stunt that wasn't supervised. That's why at the end of this trial, I'll come before you again and ask that you find Dragon Studios not liable. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Does the plaintiff wish to call a witness?
Yes, Judge. We call Eli Gauguin. May I proceed?
You may.
Good afternoon. Please introduce yourself to the members of the jury.
Hi, I'm Eli Gauguin.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a talent agent. Basically, it's my job to go out in the country, look for young actors, and do them films.
How did you become a talent agent?
This was my mom. Every Friday growing up, she'd take us out to the movies. I used to seeing the stars on the screen. I love that. So that's the field of work I decided to get into.
During your time as an agent, did you ever represent Peter Jones?
I did. Peter was my first client.
How long do you know him?
Well over a decade. I got him right when he was coming in the movie business. Really, we grew up in the industry together. He was a great friend.
So were you representing him when he passed?
Oh, well.
And when that happened?
Peter died on June 21st, 2023.
Let's talk a little bit about the circumstances surrounding his passing.
Sure.
So what movie was he filming at that point?
That was All Lost 7. Peter had been in a whole string of movies at that point, big money makers for us. I think James Bond, but without the British accents. And that was film number 7. It was supposed to be the biggest, best one yet.
And who was producing that movie?
Dragon Studios, a big production company, but the producer was Chris Doyle. It's over there.
Could you identify Mr. Doyle with an article of clothing?
It's got a gray suit and blue tie.
The witness has accurately identified Mr. Doyle. Sir, were there stunts planned for this filming?
Yeah, I mean, we had stunts for every single All Lost film. That was kind of the point. I mean, daring jumps, clinging onto buildings. That's what Peter did.
What stunt was planned specifically for this movie?
Peter pitched it, actually. He wanted to ride a motorcycle off a mountainside. CGI explosion in the background, get away from the bad guys. Thought it was a great idea.
Okay, what kind of precautions did the studio take for that stunt?
I mean, I wouldn't have put Peter out there unless I thought it would be safe. We signed up a contract and everything. We wanted a stunt coordinator on set. Really make sure everything was good to go.
What were the details of the stunt? How exactly was it supposed to happen?
Sure. Peter would get on the motorcycle. We didn't actually have him on the mountainside. We had a ramp, CGI, that in later. He'd drive up, he'd drive off, and he'd parachute down once he got the signal.
How was Mr. Jones supposed to know when to deploy his parachute?
We gave him an earpiece, especially for that. Let us be in his ear as he was falling. It let us give him the signal. We tell him to pull, and the parachute would come right out.
Would you recognize that earpiece if I were to show it to you?
Yeah.
Permission to approach the witness?
Yes, do you want to show opposing counsel first?
Yes, Judge.
Here he goes. Thank you.
Do you recognize that earpiece?
Yeah, this is Peter's earpiece. He showed it to me before we ended up going through.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to publish Exhibit 4 to the jury. It's already in evidence.
If it's already in evidence, then that's fine.
Sir, whose job was it to send a signal to Mr. Jones to deploy his parachute?
It was Chris. Chris Doyle. I mean, the deal was we were in the control room and it would be me and Chris. And he'd have the radio. Hit the button and give word at 4 seconds, not a second later.
Okay. Then let's talk about what actually happened on June 20th.
Yeah.
Sir, how did the stunt go that day?
June 20th, everything was fine. We stuck to the plan. We did it 6 times. Off the ramp, he jumped, and at 4 seconds, he pulled. Every single time Chris told him to pull, and he did.
You said that those times it went well. Did you do more takes?
I thought we were done. But yeah. We went to dinner that evening, and we sat down. I thought we were celebrating. And Chris pulls me and Peter aside. It wasn't a job well done. He said to take it. It wasn't long enough. He wanted a better shot. So he said we do it again, but longer, lower.
Sir, when Mr. Doig said that he wanted a longer take, did he ever say that he wouldn't send Mr. Jones a signal?
No. Chris promised to give a signal. It was going to be longer, but he said he'd give the signal in 9 seconds. Well, I let him pull at 10. It would be a smaller margin for error, but should have been safe.
Let's talk about what actually happened.
Yeah.
The next day, sir, how did the stunt start?
We got to set on location, and it was the same as the day before. I went back to the control room, was there with Chris. The rest of the crew helped get Peter in position. We got him up on the ramp, got the cameras in place, and he went off.
Before we talk about what happened on the ramp, let's talk about what happened in the ring.
Sure.
Who was actually in the control ring on June 21st?
It was just me and Chris.
And what was Mr. Doig's job in the control ring?
The same job he told us before. He'd give work. He'd hit the radio and give that signal. That's what he promised us to do.
Were there crew members there the day before?
Yeah.
Were they still there that day?
Yeah, no, we had the crew there.
Sir, inside the control room,
Sure.
was it anybody else's job of Mr. Doig to send that signal?
No. I mean, Chris had said that himself.
Okay.
He was going to give the word. He was the one to say the pull.
Then after Mr. Jones hit the ramp and went into the air, what happened?
Nothing. I mean, I watched the clock tick by. I was checking the seconds, and 5 seconds passed, and we hit 9. I looked over, and Chris was just standing there. And 10 seconds passed, 12, 15, and I looked over and asked him what he was doing. And Chris just put up his hand. Told me to be quiet.
What'd you do?
I mean, I kept screaming. I should have gone over and grabbed the radio out of his hands, but no, he just stood there and did nothing. And eventually Peter just pulled the cord himself, but by that point, he was almost at the ground.
So did Mr. Doig ever send that signal?
Not once.
Did you ask him why?
Yeah. I mean, after Peter hit the ground, we hopped in the helicopter, got down, had to make sure he was okay, and I knew he wouldn't be. But I started yelling at him. What were you thinking? And he just said he wanted a longer shot. He wanted more time.
Thank you. No further questions.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
I want to take a step back and start by talking a little bit more about you.
Sure.
Because, sir, it's true. You've been a talent agent for several years.
Decades. It's true.
You represented Peter Jones,
He was my first client.
and you worked with him on every single movie that he did.
That's true. Whole catalog. That was me and him.
I want to go ahead and talk about some of the things he did during those movies.
Yeah.
Because they were action movies, right?
For the most part, yeah.
He did his own stunts in those movies.
Yeah.
In fact, he insisted that in every single film he did over those years, he would do the stunts himself, right?
That's right. Peter didn't want a stunt double. That was kind of his thing.
That's right, you insisted that every stunt be real, right?
Yeah, outside of replacing things like that with ramp, no CGI, no stunt doubles, just Peter.
But even though Mr. Jones had the ideas for those stunts, he didn't coordinate them by himself, did he?
No, I mean, that's why he had me. I did everything I could to make them safe, and that's why I worked with the producers.
Mr. Gogion, please continue.
You're fine.
But Mr. Gogion, it's true you weren't the only person a part of that team, were you?
No, we worked with the production company.
It was you and the producers.
Yes.
And there was a separate stunt coordinator named Sky Stebbins, right?
That's true. We always had a stunt coordinator on scene.
Let's go back to June 1st of 2022. Because it's true that day you met with Sky Stebbins and those producers, right?
Yes.
You sat down at a table
Yeah, that's true.
and you had a conversation about this stunt in particular, isn't that right?
Yeah, we wanted to work out all the details, fine-tune them to make them safe.
You wanted to put it all pen to paper.
Yeah, we did.
You'd recognize the plan that you came to if I showed it to you today.
Yeah, sure.
Your Honor, at this time I'm approaching opposing counsel with a copy of Exhibit 34. Permission to approach the witness.
Yes. And counsel, do you know what page, oh, you know what, I found it.
Sir, this is the plan you made on June 1st of 2022, isn't it?
It is.
It's fair and accurate.
Looks to be.
It doesn't look like it's been changed or altered since you've seen it.
It looks right, sir.
Defense offers 34.
Any objections?
No.
It's received.
I want to go ahead and take a closer look at some of the things that you agreed to in this stunt plan.
Sure.
Because it talks about all the precautions, right?
That's true.
And I want to talk about who is signing off on them. Your name's on the bottom.
Yeah.
Mr. Jones's name is on the bottom.
Right to the left.
Mr. Doig's name is on the bottom.
True.
But this document wasn't agreed to by just those three people, was it?
No, we also had this stunt coordinator, Ms. Stebbins.
Let's talk a little bit more about what else that stunt coordinator was a part of.
Sure.
Because for this stunt in particular, you started filming on June 20th of 2023, right?
That's right. We actually wrapped that day. I thought we were done.
You told us a minute ago that on that day you had 6 different takes of this stunt alone.
Yes, according to this plan, we had the 4-second time and the plan changed.
Now, on direct examination, you talked a little bit about who was in the command center on either day. I want to walk through that just a little bit more because it's true. On June 20th, it wasn't just you and Mr. Doig, was it?
No, sir. Sky was with us for a number of those days.
That's right. On the 20th, that stunt coordinator was in the room, wasn't she?
That's true.
She was a part of the decision.
Well, there weren't really any decisions being made at that point. Everything had been planned, but sure.
So I want to talk about that next day, after those 6 takes had already been finished. Because that next day, Miss Stebbins wasn't in the command center with you and Mr. Doig, was it?
No, she had actually headed home. Chris told me.
Then I want to talk about whether or not Mr. Jones knew that would be the case. Because on the night of the 20th, you had a conversation with this producer and that stunt actor, right?
That's true.
You talked about making that scene a little bit longer.
That's right. Chris said he wanted to over double the time. He was just free fall.
And during this conversation, you heard Mr. Jones ask, what does the stunt coordinator think?
That's true.
In that moment, you didn't see Mr. Jones call Miss Stebbins.
No. Chris said it had the okay.
Didn't see him text Miss Stebbins himself.
No.
Didn't see him reach out to the stunt coordinator a singular time.
No, again, Chris said we got to go ahead. Don't know if that's true.
So that next day, you were there, weren't you?
It was.
You don't have any training in being in coordinating stunts, do you?
No.
Don't know how to assess whether or not they're safe.
Tell you that one wasn't.
Right next to you is Mr. Doig, true?
That's true.
Mr. Doig doesn't have any training, as far as you know, in coordinating stunts, does he?
I mean, professionally, that's what he does. He's a producer. He helps with stunts.
Sir, yes, no to my question, he doesn't have specialized training in coordinating stunts, as far as you know?
I'm not sure what his training is.
Sir, as far as you know, a single crew member on that set had the same training that Miss Stebbins had.
I don't know. They were Chris's crew.
And on the top of the mountain, just a couple 100 feet away from you, Mr. Jones was standing at the top.
Yeah, he was with his motorcycle and ready to go.
You worked with him for years.
Yeah.
And you know Mr. Jones doesn't have the training to assess his own safety.
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for expert opinion.
All right, let's hear our response.
Yes, Your Honor, this question doesn't ask for an expert opinion out of this witness, rather based on their experience, whether or not he is aware that he has the training to make that.
Okay, I agree that I think the question is, the court's going to allow the question. Why don't you ask the question in a way that asks this witness whether he knows about Mr. Jones' training?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Judge.
So, for the record, the objection is overruled.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Gogian, you told us a minute ago you've worked with him for years.
That's true. Yeah.
You know him pretty well.
Yeah, I'd like to think so.
You consider you and Mr. Jones, you were good friends.
Our families were close. That's true.
And in the decades that you knew him, you didn't know. As far as you know, he had no specialized training in assessing the safety of his own stunts.
No, that's why we had professionals.
But that day, the professionals weren't there, were they?
No, Chris said we got to go ahead, so we went with him.
And on that day, Mr. Jones went down that ramp.
And he drove.
I want to talk about whether or not he knew the risks going into it. It's not even 24 hours earlier. You sat down with him to do an interview, right?
Yeah.
Talk about the preparation that went into doing this stunt.
That's true. It was me, Miss Stebbins, Chris, and Peter.
Talk about all the training that went into doing this stunt.
It was months. Yeah.
And in that interview, he said, if I don't survive this, there's no point in making the rest of this movie.
That's true. There was a lot that could go wrong there.
He said there were a lot of problems that could go wrong with this stunt.
Yeah, parachute won't hold. Yeah.
So not even 24 hours, Mr. Jones acknowledged the possibility that his parachute would open too late. Isn't that right?
Yeah, he said it might malfunction. That's the kind of risk that goes into these things. It's true.
Thank you, sir. Nothing further.
Thank you, counsel. Any redirect from plaintiff's counsel?
Yes. Let's talk about what the expert really signed off on. Sir, in this stunt plan, is there any mention of the signal for Mr. Jones to deploy his parachute?
Yeah, it's right here in the bottom. You're supposed to give that signal 4 seconds after the motorcycle fell.
Thank you. No further questions.
Any recross?
No recross, Your Honor.
Okay, the parties want this witness excused?
Yes, Judge, we're okay with this news.
Thank you. And I'll say for both parties here, a judge is a little familiar. The court prefers Your Honor or the court when addressing the bench.
Yes, Your Honor. With that, we rest our case.
Thank you. Any evidence from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, we would like to call Cole Doig to the stand.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
May I proceed?
Yes.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon. Would you mind introducing yourself to the members of the jury?
Hi, my name is Cole Doig.
What do you do for a living, Mr. Doig?
I make movies. Hollywood, I help produce them, help get everything set up. It's a passion project.
Sir, do you know why you're here today?
I do. One of my friends, Peter, died on one of my movie sets.
Well, then I want to take a step back and talk about how he got here. Who's Peter?
I first met Peter on the first movie we ever worked together. He was the lead actor. And, you know, from there it was kind of just business, but eventually we made a lot of movies together. I got to know him as a friend.
How long? Go ahead, sir.
He was a good man.
How long did the two of you work together?
Over a decade, at least since 2010.
What kind of movies did the two of you make together?
Action films, usually stuff for the family.
Did he perform any of his own stunts?
He did. Peter was this real stunt guy, so he used to always want to, do the big stunt, and he'd come up with the ideas for him.
Well, if Mr. Jones was the one coming up with the ideas, was he also the one coordinating these stunts?
No. Peter would really just come up with the idea. We'd hire people to actually coordinate the stunts properly.
Who did you hire?
For the last movie, we hired Miss Stebbins. She was our security expert and really just got us the ball rolling on safety.
I want to go ahead and talk about the stunts from that last movie then. Sir, would you recognize a proposal for one of those stunts if you were shown one in court today?
Absolutely.
You're on permission to approach with the same Exhibit 34.
Yes, you may.
Mr. Doig, what have I just handed you?
This is the stunt plan we had made for the movie.
Who signed off on
A lot of people. Peter signed off, Eli signed off, I signed off, and Miss Stebbins signed off.
it? And from the year between this stunt plan and when that stunt was being filmed, who was a part of the preparation for it?
A lot of people. Miss Stebbins had her security and her safety people working on it. We had a bunch of staff working on it. I was involved in my capacity, and of course Peter was involved too.
I want to go ahead and talk about whether or not Peter knew anything about skydiving. In the years prior, did Mr. Jones ever do any skydiving?
Peter had done some skydiving before. I think it was All Lost 6, whatever our last movie was. He had done one of those jumps.
Would you recognize a picture of one of those jumps if you were shown one today?
No problem.
Your Honor, I'm approaching opposing counsel with Exhibit 30. Wish to approach the witness with the same.
Granted.
Thank you.
Mr. Doig, why don't I just hand it to you?
This is a photo of the skydiving that Peter did in the last movie.
Does it seem fair and accurate?
It is.
Does it look as if there's any changes or alterations to it?
Nope, it's the same photo.
The defense offers 30.
Any objections?
Yes, Your Honor, on Rule 403, substantially more misleading than purpose. May I be heard?
Yes, you may.
This movie, this shot is from a completely different movie than the one in question today. To enter this into evidence, it stands the risk of misleading the jury about where this actually came from. And if you look at the photo, it has more than one person in it, which suggests that there were heightened safety standards on set than were actually present the day of.
If I may, Your Honor?
Yes, please.
Specifically for something to get kept out under Rule 403, that prejudicial nature would have to substantially outweigh its probative value. We're not using this to show that this was the exact same fall that he did on June 21st of 2023. Rather, we're using it to show that he had knowledge and experience of skydiving. It's part of the defense's burden to prove that Mr. Jones had the opportunity to appreciate and understand the risks of diving. If I may make an offer of proof?
Sure.
Mr. Doig is going to explain that the fall he did in this movie is similar to the one that he did during June 21st, 2023.
Let's hear once more from you since it's your motion and then the court's ready to rule.
Yes, Your Honor. There's a substantial difference between this photo and what happened on June 21st. And that difference is that in this photo, Mr. Jones didn't need a signal to know when to deploy his parachute. He was actually parachuting with someone else. You can see in the photo. For them to use a photo from a completely separate movie to suggest that somehow it paralleled this one when they're completely different in the way that matters directly for this case, that's it in this one to 403.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to do with this. I'm going to overrule your 403 objection. I think the points you made, well taken. You can argue that to the jury during closing. You can cross the witness on it. But the court does have a relevance concern, but there's been an offer of proof made. Why don't you lay that evidence, that foundation, and then counsel, if you feel that he hasn't closed the loop, that this isn't relevant, you can re-raise the objection and the court will be willing to entertain it at that point.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, overruled.
Mr. Doig, taking a look at the picture here, what kind of jump is Mr. Jones doing?
Yep, so this is the high altitude, low oxygen type of jump, similar to the one we did in this case.
Your Honor, I just want to clarify with the court that Exhibit 30 is entered into evidence.
I think not yet. So what the court wants to hear is evidence as to how this is similar to the jump that was done on the day relevant to today's proceedings.
Yes, Your Honor. So, Mr. Doig, to clarify, how is this jump in All Lost 6 similar to the one on June 21st?
It's similar in the sense that where you deploy the parachute matters. They deploy the parachute similarly, lower parts of the jump. That's why it's similar.
Who was the stunt coordinator working
Objection,
on
Your
this?
Honor. Relevance.
To the photograph?
Yes.
Okay, let's hear argument.
Yes, Your Honor, they haven't closed the loop. The only proffer this witness made about how these situations are similar is that it matters when you deploy the parachute. This witness didn't testify that you even deploy in similar parts of the jump, just that it matters, that the timing matters generally. That's not enough foundation for this proffer, for Mr. Walker's proffer to be held true in this testimony.
Response, Your Honor?
Yes.
In order for something to be kept out under the relevance rule, it would have to meet a low bar. It's already a low bar objection. So we know that for Mr. Doig in this case, testifying that there's similar types of jump, and they make an offer of proof.
Sure.
I was about to ask this witness who the stunt coordinator on this movie set was. He's going to tell us it was the same one for June 21st, 2023, and that there's a difference between what happened based on her presence.
Okay, I do think that the relevance is limited, but given the low threshold for Rule 402, I'm going to allow it into evidence. So at this point, Exhibit 30 is received into the record.
Yes, Your
Your
Honor.
Honor. Mr. Doig, who was the stunt coordinator on this set?
Sky Stebbins. I had her for all my movies. She's great.
Let's move forward and talk about what happened on June 20th, 2023. Sir, how many times did you take that stuff?
At least 6.
Was Sky Stebbins present for this?
Yeah. Sky was in the control room with us. She'd watch the stunt, supervise, make sure everything was going on.
Let's move forward to June 21st. Was Sky Stebbins present for this jump?
Sky didn't come to this one, no.
What happened on this jump?
This is the jump Peter crashed on.
So did you signal to Mr. Jones that day?
I gave him the signal. I told him at exactly 9 seconds to pull the parachute. Yes.
What happened next?
He didn't pull it. I tried to tell him again. I got on the radio. I said, hey, you gotta go. You gotta pull. He just didn't pull it. He kept falling.
Did he survive?
We ended up getting in the helicopter and going down to see what had happened to him after he crashed. He's dead.
Thank you, sir. Your Honor, at this time I have nothing further. I just ask Mr. to retrieve exhibits and publish to the jury.
Yes, you can publish, I think, Exhibits 34 and Exhibit 30. There's an extra copy of 34 up here.
Your Honor, if it's all right, could you actually leave 3 and 34 to witness for cross-examination?
Sure, that's fair. Why don't we publish then after cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. And before I begin, there's a video exhibit in this case, and I just want to check to make sure that the computers are working for screen sharing purposes. Is that all right?
Yep.
Can you see that? Sure.
I can see it.
May I proceed?
Yes, you may.
Good afternoon, Mr. Doyle.
Good afternoon.
I want to begin by setting the scene of June 21st, 2023, because you said it was just you and Mr. Gogian inside the control room, right?
That's right.
Now, your job inside the control room was to send Mr. Jones a signal, sure?
That's right. It was my job to tell him, hey, you gotta pull the parachute.
You'd watch the stunt on a screen like this one, right?
Yeah, we had a couple of monitors up.
And one of those monitors showed a timer, sure?
Yeah, we had a timer on the right side, and we'd have the stunt and a couple of different cameras on the wall next to it.
Let's talk about what your job was exactly. Because you still have that stunt plan in front of you, right?
I do, yeah.
Sir, you know this stunt plan gives you specifically a job, right?
We're at.
In the last paragraph, sir, it reads, performer will wear an earbud headphone connected to the control room where Sky Stebbins, Cole Doig, and or other members of studio's production team will tell performer to open his parachute 4 seconds after the motorcycle leaves the ring. Did I read that correctly?
Yeah, you did.
On June 21st, sir, Sky Stebbins wasn't in the ring. You said that on direct examination.
Sky wasn't there.
Other members of studio's production team weren't in the ring, were they?
No.
That meant, contractually, you were the one who was supposed to signal Mr. Jones to deploy, right?
You're right. It was my job to signal.
Let's talk about why that mattered. Because we can agree there are other ways for a skydiver to gauge their altitude than just an earbud, right?
I only know of one other.
An altimeter, sure.
Yeah, it's like a little watch thing you have that'll show you where your altitude is.
Sir, you told Mr. Jones not to wear an altimeter, right?
Well, I suggested that you may not want it because of the shot. You don't want to look at the watch there. You want them to just kind of know when to pull the parachute. Very James Bond-esque.
That's right, sir. You told him not to wear it because you didn't want it to interfere with the scene, true?
Right, yeah. I told him we're going to use the earpiece method instead.
Then let's talk about what you wanted on June 21st. Because that day, sir, you wanted a longer take for your movie, right?
Yep, so on the 20th, we'd gotten a couple takes. I wanted to come back, get a little more footage for the movie.
You wanted a more substantial shot.
That's right.
A longer shot.
That's true.
A longer shot of Mr. Jones falling from 2,700 feet, right?
That's true. We wanted another shot.
Now let's talk about what you did the day of. Because you testified on direct examination that you did in fact send the signal, right?
I did send the signal.
Sir, you were here when Mr. Gogian testified, right?
I was here.
He said he was in the room with you.
He did.
He said you did not send the signal, right?
That's what he said.
But you, sir, you have quite a big stake in this case, don't you?
What do you mean?
Well, you stand to lose money.
It's my company.
You stand to have your reputation take a hit.
Good.
Then let's talk about if the evidence supports your claim that you sent a signal. At this time, Your Honor, we're publishing Exhibit 2 to the jury. It's already in evidence.
This is the video.
Yes. Sir, can you see that video okay?
I can.
Okay. Mr. Donovan has it paused at 7 seconds in. This is the moment when Mr. Jones leaves the ramp, right?
Technically, it's 6 when we did the calculations, but it's close.
Well, you can see on the screen he's just leaving the ramp then, right?
Right, but when we did the calculations, we did it with 6, not 7.
So, sir, this is the moment when you were supposed to start the timer, sure?
That's right.
And you promised Mr. Jones you'd signal 9 seconds in, sure?
I did. I told him I'd keep him simple.
Mr. Donovan, could you play 9 more seconds and stop at 16 seconds?
Right there. That's where I signaled.
You're claiming this is the moment when you told Mr. Jones, pull, 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 true?
It's right before the camera cuts. That's right.
Now, the date before, sir, on June 20th, you actually had the same job, didn't you?
I did.
It was your job to tell him to pull, pull, pull.
Yep, pull the parachute.
And sir, you admit the day before, every time you told Mr. Jones to deploy his parachute, he did so immediately, right?
He did. When we had done the prior one, it was 4 seconds instead of 9 seconds, he had deployed it.
Let's see what he does here. Mr. Donovan, could you hit play and pause at 20 seconds? Sir, in those seconds, Mr. Jones doesn't reach for his parachute, does he?
No, and that's what I was concerned about.
He doesn't reach for his earbud?
No,
You can actually see his arms in this frame, can't you?
you can.
His arms are behind him, true?
Yep, kind of like skydiver back.
He's still not reaching for his parachute, right?
No, he reaches for his parachute in about a second.
All right, sir. Well, then let's talk about what happened after this video was taken. Thank you, Mr. Donovan. We can take this. Shortly after this, sir, you know Mr. Jones crashed into the ground, right?
I saw it.
You helicoptered over to the scene.
We did.
And then there were other crew members around you, true?
Yeah, about 5, 6, 7 people.
And at this point, sir, Mr. Gogian asked you, why didn't you signal at 9 seconds, true?
That's what he said. Well, he said, why did you wait so long?
Sir, you didn't say, well, hold on, I actually did signal at 9 seconds, did you?
I didn't say anything. I was looking at a dead body.
Well, sir, in that moment, you actually said, I wanted a longer cut. Isn't that right?
You didn't do the sequence of events correctly. That happened before.
Pardon me, sir. It was while you were looking at the dead body that you said, I just wanted a longer cut. True?
No, we came down. He'd asked me, what are you doing? I said, we were looking for a longer shot. And then he said, why did you wait so long? That's when I said nothing. That's the order of events.
Okay, well, let's get the order of events straight. You're down, you've just taken a helicopter down to the body, true?
Yep.
At this point, Mr. Gogian asks you, what were you doing, right?
Yep, we're stepping out. He says, what are you doing?
And you say, I just wanted a longer shot, true?
That's right. I did.
And then Mr. Gogian asks you, why didn't you signal at 9 seconds, right?
That's right.
And
I didn't
that,
say anything.
and sir, that's when you say you were silent.
That's when I said nothing. You're right.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, counsel. Any redirect examination?
No redirect, Your Honor, just permission to publish the exhibits to the jury.
Yes, you may.
Can I leave?
It's a good question. We'll look to the parties. May this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Doig. Any further evidence from either party?
No, Your Honor, with that, the defense rests our case in chief.
Great. I think we are ready for closing arguments. Is that right?
Yes, Your Honor.
Why don't we, we're not taking a recess, but the parties can have 2 minutes just to talk amongst themselves. Everyone stay in the courtroom, and then I'll just look to the both of you when you're ready, and we'll proceed with closing, okay?
May I retrieve Exhibit 4 from the jury box?
Yes, you may. Yes, sir. Actually, a question for the parties before we get started. It sounds like some things are in evidence. I have Exhibit 2, which is the video, Exhibit 5, which is the earbud, Exhibit 30, and Exhibit 34. Anything else that was entered into evidence?
Don't believe so.
Your Honor, prior to trial, both sides stipulated to exhibits 1 to 25, but those have been briefed.
Okay, so 1 to 25 will be argued to the jury?
No, Your Honor, not to my knowledge, but they have been entered in evidence.
Okay.
That's our understanding as well.
Okay, great. Whenever you're ready. You can take the 2 minutes, or you can get started before that if you'd like.
Yes, Your Honor, we'll take the 2 minutes.
Sure.
We're ready to proceed, Your Honor.
Okay, you may proceed.
Nine seconds. That's all the time Mr. Jones had to free fall before he had to deploy his parachute. 9 seconds. But when that timer hit 0, you learned the producer whose job it was supposed to be to send him a signal stayed silent. He waited for a signal that never came. And that is why we sued the defendant for negligence. Now, this trial is about a very simple issue. In a few moments, you're going to move back into a deliberation room and be handed a verdict form. And it asks one question. Did the defendant prove that Peter Jones assumed the risk that caused his death? You saw today the answer is no. The 3 facts we showed you prevented them from meeting their burden. Let's go through those facts. The first fact is that the defendant promised Mr. Jones that he would signal when it was time for him to pull his parachute. Now, this fact isn't even in dispute. Opposing counsel has talked a lot about what a stunt coordinator approved and didn't approve on the day of the job. You'll have Exhibit 34 when you deliberate. And you'll see that the plan the stunt coordinator signed off on promised Mr. Jones that someone would signal to him when it was time to deploy. And you learned that on the day of the jump. With everyone mentioned in this plan out of the room, the only person left was Mr. Doyle. They promised him to send a signal. And that brings us to fact 2. They didn't send that signal. We called Mr. Godin, and he was actually in the control room the day of this jump. He told you that he was with Mr. Doyle, and when that clock hit 9 seconds, Mr. Doyle didn't say pull, 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 deploy, deploy, deploy. He just held up a hand, told him to be quiet, because he wanted a longer shot. Now, Mr. Doyle has his own account. He took the stand and told you, you know what, no, I actually did send a signal. There are 2 reasons you know that's not true. The first reason is that Mr. Doig has a reason to lie. He's the defendant in this lawsuit. Let's compare the witnesses in this case. Our witness isn't even the plaintiff. He doesn't stand to gain a single cent, dollar, or dime of profit from this lawsuit. His reputation isn't on the line. The defendant, on the other hand, stands to lose money, reputation, value. Believing him is like believing a used car salesman who tells you, oh, it's a gem, when you see the smoke coming out of the car. And that brings us to reason number 2. You know that he didn't send that signal. The video evidence. You saw today that Mr. Jones doesn't reach for anything at all when Mr. Doig claims he sent that signal. But the day before, he reached and pulled for that cord immediately. Don't you think he would have even flinched if he actually had been told to deploy his parachute, yelled like Mr. Doig said he did? Of course he would have. The reason that his hands are still behind him and he's flying through the air without taking any precaution is because he trusted Mr. Doig and Mr. Doig said nothing. The defendant never sent that signal. And that brings us to fact number 3. Because of that failure, Mr. Jones died. Now, this case might be a little confusing on its face, because the defense has argued that Mr. Jones knew the risk that killed him. And that actually has 2 parts. First, that Mr. Jones knew the risks, and second, that risk killed him. Because defense has spent a lot of time today talking about all of the risks involved with parachuting, that you could get tangled up in a motorcycle, or your parachute might not deploy. But do you know what risk they never proved Mr. Jones knew about? That the person on the other end of the line would stay silent and not send a signal. That's the risk that actually killed him. And they didn't prove Mr. Jones knew about it. That means when you go back to deliberate and you have this verdict form, you can answer no. Because they haven't proven that it's more likely than not that Mr. Jones actually was aware of the risk he faced that day. Because the risk he faced wasn't one that he prepared for. It wasn't one they trained him for. It was one that could have been prevented if Mr. Doig did his job out. On his direct examination, opposing counsel entered Exhibit 30. And when you go back to deliberate, I actually want you to contrast what's shown here with what actually happened the day Mr. Jones died. Because you see in this photo, they're skydiving with somebody else, somebody whose safety matters to Mr. Jones. He didn't need an earbud in his ear, like in Exhibit 5, to tell him when to deploy his parachute. Someone was there. And the difference between what happened in this photo and what happened on June 31st wasn't just the safety standards. Mr. Jones lived through this jump. He didn't live through the jump when Mr. Doig didn't do his job. Find the defendant liable, because he waited for a signal that never came. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Closing from defense.
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court. Members of the jury, Everett, in a courtroom like this, has a part to play. Whether it's both counsels, who have been working this case for months, or our eyewitnesses, who have had to relive that moment over and over and over again. for you, who in just a moment will go back to that deliberation room, look at the evidence, and come to your decision. Everyone in this room has a part to play. Because when somebody's livelihood, their future, is on the line, it's important that we get things right. And on June 21st, 2023, Peter Jones stood at the top of that ramp because he knew that. So when the cameramen were in place, the producer was in that command center, and the one person who's nowhere to be found is the person who's helped him with every practice, every preparation, every stunt he's done in the past. He gets nervous. He hesitates. But he goes anyway. This stunt wasn't supervised, and it killed him. Look, members of the jury, I agree. What happened to Peter Jones was horrifying. I understand that when something like this happens in a community like ours, it's natural for us to look for a reason why. And I get that it would just be easier to point the finger at a corporation and say, you are responsible. But it's never that simple. Because what the law says is that when somebody recognizes the dangers of doing something, but chooses to do it anyways, then nobody else can be found liable for their decisions, for the consequences of their actions. That's why, as the defense today, we chose to take on a burden of our own, to prove to you by a preponderance of the evidence that Mr. Jones understood the risk of taking that jump, and he did so anyways. And we showed that to you today by breaking this case down into 3 simple parts. What he wanted, what he knew, what he did. Take those one at a time. First, what he wanted. Because what we heard from the witnesses in this case today was that for every stunt that he's ever done, Mr. Jones came up with the idea. We know that he has a reputation of being one of the best action movie stars in the entire country. He wants to do stunts no other actors can even dream of. Mr. Goguillon said it himself, he makes millions and millions and millions of dollars off a reputation of doing these stunts. This one was no different. What we learned today, members of the jury, was that he wanted to do this job. So that's why a year and a half before he actually took it, he sat down with his team and he said, let's make this work. That's why they called him a stunt coordinator, members of the jury. Somebody who was trained, specialized, had the expertise to plan something like this out. Because despite what that stunt coordinator had background in, let's talk about what Mr. Jones actually knew. Because he acknowledged it himself. We heard about an interview that he did less than 24 hours before this accident even happened. His agent was there in the room when he said, if I don't survive this jump, what's the point of making the rest of the movie? In that moment, he is acknowledging the possibility that he could die. We even asked him, in that moment, did he mention any of the other problems that could go wrong? And he offered to it himself. He said his parachute could be pulled too late. It could malfunction. It could cause him to fall to his death. Members of the jury, what Peter Jones knew was what all of us know. Riding a motorcycle down a 2,700-foot cliff is risky. So number 3, what he did anyways. Because maybe for a moment, he had a thought of hesitation. The night before, when he realizes that that stunt plan they had been talking about for months and months and months had finally started to deviate. When those 4 seconds were no longer 4 seconds, when that height had been changed, when the people listed as who can signal to them shrunk and shrunk and shrunk, he had a decision he had to make. And as he thought, he had one question in his mind. What was the stunt coordinator's thoughts? So that next morning, when he puts on his gear, takes his bike to the top of that mountain and stands on the edge of that ramp, he knows one person isn't going to be there to watch. The one person who designed the entire thing. But despite all of it, he leans forward. He flies down that ramp into the air. Mr. Farnsworth said it himself. 2,000, 1,500, 1,000, 500. But maybe, if somebody who knew what they were doing had been in that command center, someone they hired to help them had been there, this whole thing could have been forgotten. Because in that last moment, I'm sure, Mr. Jones knew that that stunt wasn't supervised, and it was going to kill him. Fine Dragon Studios, not lying. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Any rebuttal?
Yes, Your Honor. You can't assume a risk that's concealed from you. Mr. Walker began his closing argument by saying that everyone has a part to play. Mr. Jones thought that Mr. Doyle was going to play his part. That's what he actually thought. He had no idea Mr. Doyle would let him down while he was falling. This case is simple. The defendant cut Mr. Jones' life short just because he wanted a longer cut. Mr. Jones was never sent a signal, so now we're going to ask you to send a signal to the defendant on his behalf. Find him liable. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. The jury has been pre-instructed. The case is now with them. And what that means is, folks, if you could submit your ballots online, and then we can do a quick round of comments for our competitors.